Hi, welcome back. It's time to embrace the love on the Kevin Preston Toy Box. That's right. We're going to switch gears here, and I'm going to start profiling for your enjoyment a whole series of cameras, both still and movie cameras, vintage and newer, and share with you my love for filming things, all sorts of things. Things you may not want to see, things you don't want to see, things you can't believe you're seeing. But first things first. The first camera I want to profile is we're going to go to a Cars and Coffee coming up here in a couple weeks, and I want to shoot it, take little snippets of the activity in the cars down there, and I want to do it in kind of a retro, I hate using the term retro, but I want to do it in a really cool way. I'm going to try using black and white film and a regular 8mm camera. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a regular 8mm, or sometimes it's referred to as a standard 8 camera is, I'm going to go through all that with you on this video. So we're going to be profiling the Honeywell Elmo Pocketauto Zoom 83 camera. I've had this camera for probably 8 years and I've never used it. I actually had one before and I couldn't get the automatic exposure to work, so I kind of had to take it apart and try to fix it. This one didn't work when I got it, and I took it apart. It had a lot of corrosion in it, but I repaired it and it appears to work, but I've not exposed any film with it yet. So we're going to have some fun with it. But I thought what might be a good preamble to all this is have a discussion on film and cameras. So let's put the camera aside for a moment and talk a little bit about film stock. People hear the word 8mm, and some folks think of the old video standard of 8mm, but we're talking about film and movie standards. So what was originally brought out for the home market was something called regular 8 or standard 8. It was sometimes called 8mm film. And I forget when this came out. I think it was the 50s. But home movies used to be really for the people who had a lot of money, because it was 16mm on lesser expensive 16mm cameras. And then when 8mm came out, it really revolutionized making films yourself at home of your kids and things like that, because although the cameras were expensive for the time, they were certainly nothing like 16mm cameras, and someone who's an amateur or a family person could really afford to get it. So Kodak made cameras, Revere made cameras. There were a lot of early cameras made, and the media was what's called regular 8 film, like I said. And it usually came on these rolls when developed. And to give you an idea of what this looks like, let's try to get closer here. You see there's sprockets for the camera claw as well as the projector to pull through, and then to the right there of the sprocket holes is the film image area. Okay, so not very big image area, as you can see there. They sold thousands and thousands of cameras and thousands of rolls of film. 8mm film is very interesting, because what is 8mm film? Which is still available today, by the way. You can still get regular 8. I've got some Fomapan film that we're going to be using. But interestingly, the film came to you on a roll that looked like this. It was called a 25-foot roll. And there was 25 feet of film on this, but notice the width. The film actually went on there. It's much wider than the reel. And that's because what is 8mm film? It's 16mm film that's been sprocketed differently. They've got more sprocket holes in it so that it could fit in a smaller package, and the pull-down claw had enough holes to pull down in a small space. And it's 16mm wide. It's just the same film with more sprockets in it, slightly different sprocketing in it, than the 16mm film you'd watch in the old school movies if you went to school in the 60s or 70s. Or if you buy today, 16mm. And what happens is when you film it, you put this spool of film in the camera, and then there's a take-up spool. We'll see this in a moment. And the film winds through the camera and it exposes half the film. Then you turn the reel over when it's done, put it back through again, and expose the other side of it. When the film goes to the lab, they process the film just like 16mm film, and then they split the film down the middle and cement the ends together, and you end up with half that width of, or 50 feet approximately, of movie film. This roll runs about 3 minutes in duration. The old cameras ran at about 16 frames per second. Some of the newer ones, before Super 8 took over, run at about 18 frames a second. So that's kind of an interesting point. Now, what happened to the regular 8mm market in the 60s is Super 8 came on the line. And Super 8 used different sprocketing. They turned the sprockets on their side and they made them smaller. By then, the claw mechanisms and the camera mechanisms had become more refined. And as you can see, a much bigger area for the picture. If we compare this, for example, let me put them side by side here. If you compare the film areas of the, try to get this so you can see it, of Super 8 on the right to regular 8 on the left, you can see how much more space you have for the film image on the right. Can you see that pretty good? So much more space for the film image. Okay, so Super 8 really took off and regular 8 kind of faded because you've got a bigger picture area, brighter, bigger frame to start with. So when you blew it up on a projection screen, it was clear. Most all of the consumers used what was called reversal film, which means that the film that runs to the camera is developed and it's like slide film, and that's the exact same film you end up projecting. They also make Super 8 film now as a negative, so you can shoot it and it's a negative when it's processed, but then you've either got to make a work print or a final print by printing it onto regular film, or what everybody really does is they digitize it. They use a telecine process and they digitize the film into a digital format. So I wanted to share those things with you before we go on. Now, while regular 8mm came in these rolls, Super 8 came in cartridges. And the cartridges were very easy. You didn't have to flip the roll over or anything like that. They would just snap into a compartment, such as on this Bolex 155 macro zoom. They snap right in here, and it snaps in, and then you close the door, and you've got your 3 minutes of film without having to flip the roll over or do anything else with it. Now it's time to turn our attention to the camera itself. Again, this is the Elmo Pocketauto Zoom 83, and I just love this thing. It's very neat how it goes together. I just took off the lens cap by accident, but that's okay. We wanted it off. Up front, you have a lens that only has a focus ring on it. And what's really cool is I have these screw-on wide-angle lens, and it turns it into wide-angle. And what I really like about this camera is it is actually an SLR. It has a lot of features that the earlier regular 8 cameras didn't have, but by the time the early mid-60s rolled around, right before Super 8 came in, these regular 8 cameras had a lot of features to them. This one is no exception. One of the things I like about it is it has an electronic aperture, so it will read the existing light and set the aperture of the lens accordingly. So all you really have to worry about is the focus. You have a one-touch zoom, manual zoom lever right here. And being an SLR type, what you see in the viewfinder is exactly what you see coming out of the lens. And I'm going to see if you can actually see in the viewfinder here. Maybe if I'm very, very careful. But you can see in the window there that up at the top is a little indicator that shows that you're out of film, but there's a scale at the top that shows you your aperture setting. And that will, needle will move around as if the battery's installed to show what f-stop, if you will, you'll be using. And it's really neat because what you see is in the, there's no parallax, so what you see in the viewfinder here, which by the way you can also focus, depending on how your eyes are, you can make adjustments to the focusing lens right there. So that's really cool. Right here we've got some interesting controls. You've got a button you can push to see what level your batteries are at. And here is where you set your, trying to get it close enough in here before it goes out of focus, but you set the ASA of your film right here, and what your film speed will be, either 24 or 16 frames per second. and that will of course calibrate accordingly the sensitivity of the electric eye. On the back, you have a scale here that shows how much film you have left. On the front, you have a very convenient filter switch. This will drop an 85A filter if you have the type of film that needs to be balanced for daylight. It'll throw a filter in the lens there and compensate for that, so that your outdoor film, or your indoor film shot outdoors, doesn't look odd. You've got a control here to lock the film advance, or to lock it on, or to set it up for single frame advance. You can also put a single frame advance trigger right in there. You can thread it in there. So the camera can be used just like this and shot. Loading is done by a flip switch at the top, which opens up this compartment here. And this is what I was telling you about it. It loads almost like an old reel-to-reel tape. You put the loaded film spool on here, thread the film around into the gate right here. This pressure pad then is locked back down, and then the take-up spool is here. So when you advance the film, this axis spins and rolls the film off this roll. When you're done, you change positions, put the empty one over here and the full one over here, and expose the other side of the film. Very cool. When you're done, you take it out and mail the film spool in for processing. Now, I'm not going to actually load this on screen because I always recommend you do it in a darkened area. It doesn't have to be pure black or pitch black, but I prefer it in a very darkened area and won't show up very well on video. Then we close this. Now, I've got some neat accessories in addition to that screw-on lens that screws on the front and gives you a wide angle. I've also got another interesting item here, and that is this thread-on handle, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But the first thing we want to do is put the batteries in. So what we do is push this button and remove this back panel. You can see some leftover marks from where it was corroded. I cleaned this up and got it really good and redid the contacts, which were all corroded. But what's interesting about the battery pack is here's what it looks like. And it is essentially 4 AA batteries that are put inside this clear plastic container. This, when I got the camera, the batteries had oozed out all over the place, and I had to really clean up. I got a little, this label is a little scarred from all that, but I cleaned it up pretty good. It shows the orientation of the batteries, and also inside here were the metal straps that connected the poles of the batteries together so that they were all in one series and made up a 6-volt battery pack. I replaced those simply with folded up tinfoil, and it works great. So what happens now is you actually take your cartridge, your battery cartridge, and this tab goes up. You put it in, snap it in like that, and then you put your bottom back on. And you'll notice that the battery meter, I don't know if you can see that or not, the battery meter moves over to fully charged, and you can hear the motor running, and you can see put a take-up reel on here. And you can see the take-up reel spinning. Very nice. Now, the other accessory I was telling you about that I really like is this handle, which is a little challenging to put on because what you have to do is make sure it goes in this little alignment hole here. we can thread it on. Now, this handle is very interesting. It's a power zoom handle. It takes batteries, but I have to do some work on this to make it functional. And what you can do is push this knob up and down, and it mechanically is geared to the zoom control here, and will let you zoom in and out with power right here where these two gears meet. Very cool. But I just like it so that I can hold it, the camera, steadier, and use this trigger to advance the film. Isn't that cool? So all in all, a very neat regular 8mm camera, and you're going to see the output of what this camera can do in a week or so when we do Cars and Coffee. So stay tuned for that.